Hi, my name is Brenda Lombardi, and this is my tape of the fertility test and the fertility slides for boys. Okay, welcome everyone. We are going to have a little test before we start our fertility slides, and it's nothing to get nervous about. I'm going to let you correct it yourself. We'll go over the answers after you take this test, but it's a neat way to actually test yourself on what you know about fertility and what you need to learn. So teens, it's in your book, it's page 8 in your book, and for parents, it's page 9. So go ahead and start that test. All right, let's go over the answers, but before and after I do, I definitely want to know I will ask you to raise your hand if you got 100%. It's hard to get 100% because there's a lot of research out there that changes about fertility. So number 1, menstruation is the most important event in a woman's menstrual cycle. That answer is false. The purpose of a menstrual cycle is to release an ovum or an egg from one of the ovaries. Therefore, ovulation is the most important event of menstrual. Number 2, in most women, menstruation occurs every 28 days. That is false. The length, and moms, you probably know that, the length of menstrual cycles of most women is irregular. Menstrual cycles are usually from 25 to 38 days in length, are considered like within normal limits. Number 3, a woman is born with all the ova or eggs she'll ever have. Definitely true. A baby girl's ovaries has about 1 to 2 million eggs that she's born with, and those are the ones she'll ever, she'll have those for her entire life. She will not develop any new eggs. All right, number 4. Sperm needs cervical mucus to survive more than 2 or 3 hours. That is true. For those of you who do NFP or the Crichton method, you guys know that. The type of mucus which can be secreted from the cervix during the fertile phase of a woman's menstrual cycle guides the sperm to the cervix and also nourishes and prolongs the life of the sperm. So number 5, pregnancy can occur without the couple having full genital intercourse. This is a trick question. That is true. Pregnancy can occur from just contact from the male and female genital organs without going, as they say, all the way. During the fertile phase of the woman's cycle, the first few drops of fluid from the erect penis is actually the highest concentration of sperm. A woman cannot become pregnant the first time she has genital intercourse. That is definitely false. If a woman is in the fertile phase of her cycle, pregnancy definitely can occur with her first genital intercourse, and remember, even genital contact. So number 7, usually one ovum or egg will ovulate during a woman's menstrual cycle. That is true. If more than one egg ovulates, both eggs will ovulate within the same 24-hour period. Because ovulation is precisely controlled by the hormones, non-identical twins are produced when 2 eggs are fertilized in the same menstrual cycle. Number 8, ovulation occurs on only one day in each menstrual cycle. That is true. A woman does not ovulate today and then like a week later in the same menstrual cycle. Her reproductive hormones prevent this from happening. Number 9, ovulation is the release of an ovum or egg from the ovary. That is true. When an egg is released from the ovary, it enters the fallopian tubes where fertilization can occur if sperm is present. Number 10, men develop thousands of new sperm cells every day. That is true. Men normally develop thousands of sperms every day from puberty until death. We'll talk about that in the presentation. Number 11, ovulation occurs on the 14th day of each menstrual cycle. Yeah, I'm sure moms, you got that one, right? False. Ovulation occurs approximately 2 weeks before the next menstrual bleeding, no matter what the length of the menstrual cycle may be. Number 12, the reproductive hormones in men are secreted at almost constant levels from puberty until death. Again, that is true. In men, hormones from the pituitary gland and the testes are secreted at a relatively constant rate, and we'll talk about that in the slide program, from puberty until death. Number 13, life begins when a baby is implanted in the uterus. That is false. Life begins when the sperm and the ovum unite at fertilization in the fallopian tubes. This is also known as conception. Number 14, the sex of a baby is determined by the sex chromosome in the mother's egg. I remember getting this one wrong on my fertility test. The answer is false. The sex of the baby is determined by the sex chromosomes of the sperm, which penetrates the ovum. If the sperm is an X chromosome, you'll have a baby girl. And if it's a Y chromosome, the baby is a boy. All ovas or eggs are only X sex chromosomes. Last but not least, number 15, the menstrual cycle and menstrual period have the same meaning. I got that one wrong too, I remember that. That is false. The menstrual cycle begins with menstrual bleeding and ends the day before the next menstrual bleed. The menstrual period is the menstrual bleed. I know it's like a play on words, but we'll talk about that a little bit more. So let's move on to our presentation, The Power to Love, God's Gift of Our Sexuality, Part 1, Our Sexual Bodies. I love this picture. This is one of the most beautiful frescoes by Michelangelo on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican in Rome. Has anyone ever been to the Sistine Chapel? Yeah, this is pretty significant. It's an amazing place to be and to see. It shows God stretching out his arm to give life to Adam. And here's Adam. And encircled in God's other arm is Eve. And she is looking longingly at Adam. Now, whether creation happened like this really isn't important. But what is important is that God commanded Adam and Eve to leave and cleave and become one, and to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. God's plan for sex is about love and life within marriage. So, beautiful depiction of that. Now, the church asks each and every one of us to discover ourselves, to come to know our bodies, which we'll learn today, and to know our sexual powers, which we'll talk about. Now think about it. Knowledge of our sexual powers should lead to respect of ourselves and of others. Every young man should see a woman he meets as a wonderful creature of God, made for her own sake and deserving to be loved in the image of God. And every young girl should see each man she meets as a wonderful creature of God, made for his own sake and deserving to be loved as an image of God. That wonderful saying that John Paul II often states, to be made in the image and likeness of God. Now, most young people become aware of their sexual powers, and it's very obvious because very obvious body changes take place. These changes take place during puberty, after their sex hormones start to be secreted throughout the bloodstream. Puberty occurs around the ages of 10 and 13. Usually it's earlier than girls and boys. It's interesting. I have a 10-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 15-year-old, and they're boys. And the level of testosterone in my house is very high these days. Now, the changes of puberty are controlled by hormones. Hormones can be described as these chemical messengers which quickly deliver information to other parts of the bodies, to one part of the body to the other. Hormones are secreted by a gland directly to the bloodstream, which act on another organ in the body. They are present in both male and female. Now, in both male and females, puberty begins in the brain, and here's the female and here's the male. Now, the brain stimulates the pituitary gland, which is the master gland in the body, which hangs like a little bell under the brain. In the male, the pituitary gland secretes two chemical messengers. It's the follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. These hormones are carried in the bloodstream to the testicles, where sperm is developed. Here is the testes. And testosterone is released. Testosterone gives the young man his secondary sex characteristics, which are like a deep voice, strong muscles, a beard. Now for the female, the same thing occurs. The hormones are secreted through the pituitary gland through the bloodstream, and they are the follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. And they stimulate the ovaries to release an egg where ovulation takes place. And the two hormones that are released from the ovaries are estrogen and progesterone. And in girls, these produce secondary sex characteristics, which is breast development and body build. This also controls the woman's menstrual cycle. These changes in both male and female make procreation possible with the help of God. Now, it's different to see how these hormones work in both the male and the female. Here we have Mr. Freddie Steady. You can see that he's pretty much steady across the board with his hormones. And then Miss Roller Coaster. I love these names. They show the hormones in this way. Here we have the male hormone pattern. Freddie Steady, the male hormone and Freddie Steady are constant during a man's entire life. But a woman's sex hormone, Roller Coaster, as you can see, is up and down through each menstrual cycle. And do you think this has an effect on a woman's mood? All these different hormones going up and down depending where she is in her menstrual cycle? It is well known that it does. It makes these hormones, in males, because these hormones are secreted at the same level throughout his life, we can say that men are always fertile. And I think this is an important point to make. From puberty until he dies, a man is constantly developing sperm. Hundreds of thousands of sperms every day. His fertility is constant. And here is constant Carl showing us that he is always fertile. This means that a man can always father a child. So let's look a little bit at what sperm look like. Talk about sperm a little bit. Sperm is the male reproductive cells. They are very unique. They are the smallest cells in the body, and they're the only ones with 23 chromosomes. All his other cells have 46 chromosomes. All the genetic material is in the head of the sperm, as you can see here. This is a father's contribution to new life. The tail is used to propel and move the sperm as he travels. Now, most of the male reproductive organs are outside his body, and there's a good reason for this. Sperm cells need organ temperature that is lower than body temperature in order to develop normally. The scrotum, right here, is the pouch that contains two testes or testicles, where sperm cells are developed. It's right here, this area. The testes are composed of tiny tubes called tubules, which are, if they were stretched out, they would be over 100 feet long. And I'm not surprised, because if a man makes sperm constantly, he needs a lot of tubes to do that, right? Mature sperm are stored in the epididymis, right here. So the sperm that's made is stored right here, until the time of their release from the man's body. The sperm are released from the male's bodies through a tube called the vas deferens. The vas deferens, it takes about 10 weeks for the sperm to develop and mature. Seminal fluid, which protects and transports the sperm, is added to the seminal vesicles. You can see that. And there's the prostate gland and the Copler's gland. Sperm plus seminal fluid is called semen. Now, both urine and semen leave the body through the urethra, right here. And there's a special valve between the prostate gland and the bladder, which shuts off so that only semen so that the urine does not enter the urethra and semen is ejected through the penis, which is made of a soft, spongy tissue. And when semen is ejected, it can contain up to 500 million sperm. This is amazing. And the penis is made of a spongy tissue, like I said. Upon sexual stimulation, the penis widens, lengthens, and hardens and becomes filled with blood. This is called an erection, and the erect penis is placed in a woman's vagina in an act of intercourse. Now, sex drive. When a young man becomes sexually mature, he experiences basic instinctive drive, which refers to sex drive. The hormone testosterone is responsible for much of a male's feelings and desires to pursue a female, which is a good thing. I mean, I remember reading with John Paul II, how it talks about this sex drive, what a beautiful thing it is. Now, unfortunately, in our culture, sex drive is often looked upon as negatively and a sign of male aggressiveness. In fact, the very word sex drive conjure up an image of a car speeding down a highway with reckless abandon and the need for one to control it. But sex drive is really, it's part of God's design. It is responsible in part for a man's desire to go out of himself and complete himself. In this way, it can help a man avoid selfishness and aggression. When a young man understands the role that hormones play, he can appreciate his body, his sexual desires, and strive for self-mastery and a full integration of his body, mind, and heart. Learning to live with the full force of his sexual desires and drive, with self-respect, reverence, and restraint, is developing the virtue of chastity and the dignity, and to the dignity, the gift of one's sexual body. The end.